Hey everybody, Harv here. Let's continue our lecture in chapter 21. So, at the same time the Cold War is going on, decolonization is going to be going on. And decolonization is really important because this kind of represents the end of this big theme that we've talked about throughout this entire class of Europe interacting with the rest of the world. If you all think back to when we first started this class, right, the Age of Exploration, chapter 2, right after the Renaissance. We kind of moved on to then the next kind of phase of Europe interacting with the rest of the world is with the Atlantic economy, those mercantile nations, colonialism. It evolved yet again in the 1800s, the late 1800s with new imperialism, and decolonization really kind of represents the end of this big theme of Europe interacting with the rest of the world and exerting its power over the rest of the world. And remember that power now from our traditional Western European countries, France and Britain, is being taken by the United States and the Soviets, okay? And the decolonization also kind of represents the end of those traditional powers, right? France and Britain exerting, a huge amount of influence and power over the world. So decolonization, we're really going to see a big transformation in Africa and Asia as these areas and these colonies are going to transform into more independent nations, okay? Now, a big reason why this goes down and a facilitator to decolonization is going to be World War II. Britain and France are going to, with the rise of the Nazis and fascism, are going to have to bring a lot of their military back from their colonial empire. So they really can't govern as effectively and rule as effectively because they don't have the military presence and the power there. And that's part of the problem is because they have to get ready to defend their territory, England, the UK, and France, okay? And we're also going to see a huge rise in nationalist and independence movements during this time, okay? Another reason why we're going to see decolonization is the United Nations is going to call for an end to colonialism, and because the United States is, the predominant, voice in the UN. I mean, the UN is in New York, and the United States was one of the countries that really pushed for a creation of the United Nations. We're going to see the UN and its call for colonialism really help facilitate decolonization. Okay, and the United States, kind of hypocritically, was also opposed to colonialism. It's also not like the United States has taken territory in the Caribbean, like Puerto Rico and Hawaii. But the United States was also opposed to colonialism. But ironically, they're not going to give up their own colonial holdings. So that's quite interesting. But the United States obviously is the predominant superpower in the world, and France and Britain, if they want to, keep their status quo and keep their power structures, is going to have to listen to the United States because the United States now is calling the shots. Okay, now one of the biggest examples of decolonization is going to be Great Britain withdrawing from India. Remember, India was their crown jewel, and we are going to see Great Britain start that empire. And think about it, that empire that has existed since the 16th, 17th century, that great grand British empire that ruled where the sun never set upon. We're gonna see that start to shrink and eventually go away. We're gonna see decolonization with the Dutch East Indies is gonna become Indonesia. We're gonna see Belgium give up the Congo and India. And we're going to see Great Britain. They have dominated India starting, remember, from the 7 Years' War. And we're going to see this Indian territory start to be divided up and to gain its independence. Now, a big, point within decolonization from India was how to divide it up, okay? You had the Hindu population and the Muslim population to take into account as you divided this territory up. And that's important. And we're going to look at a map and you'll be able to see that. Now, India, after World War I, is going to move for independence, and that's going to be led by Gandhi, okay? He was the leader of nationalism. He used his nonviolent passive resistance methods in order to help kind of achieve their independence, and that was really effective. And remember, Gandhi was really influential to Martin Luther King for the civil rights movement in the United States, okay? He was, a martyr. He was imprisoned many times, and he's really going to be the figure, inspiration for Indian nationalism and independence, okay? In 1947, and you can see just a couple years after World War II, Great Britain is going to leave India, and we're going to see the creation of two states. Now, remember, it was really important that we note the Hindu population, the Muslim population. That's going to facilitate the creation of two states. We're going to see the creation of a Muslim Pakistan and a Hindu India. Now, there are still many Muslims who live in India, and that has created a lot of religious tension. There's been a lot of problems between the two groups in India. And to this day, both Pakistan and India don't necessarily get along very well. Okay, and there's some border disputes, and one of the areas of where there could be a fight or a nuclear war could be between Pakistan and India. They're both nuclear armed countries. Eastern Pakistan is going to become Bangladesh, and we'll take a look at the map and see that. So here was the Indian territory. We're going to see it divided up into the Middle East, Pakistan, and India. And here is Eastern Pakistan. This is Bangladesh. Okay, and you can see all the different areas in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 80s gaining their independence. Decolonization. Pretty incredible. And you can see one of the last areas of decolonization was in 1997. When I was 8 years old, Hong Kong went back to China, and that was Great Britain had taken that, and Great Britain took that during when they were imperializing China, the Opium Wars. Okay, and there's Gandhi. All right, now Gandhi had a vision that there would be in India, many religions would be able to coexist and live together, but that necessarily did not come true, right? Because of the religious conflicts between the Hindu and the Muslim populations. And India and Pakistan have come to the brink of nuclear war, and there's a lot of tension still over Kashmir. There's a lot of territorial tensions between the two countries. And I think just actually like a couple years ago, maybe last year, like a couple of planes got shot down, troop movements, and so it's there's a lot of tension going on between those two countries, and still today. Okay, we're going to see, Great Britain. One of the main reasons of why Great Britain is going to retreat from their colonial empire is cost. Okay, it costs a lot, and also they, remember imperialism, foreign affairs that could lead to another war, and with nuclear war going out, Great Britain wanted to avoid conflict. They wanted to avoid the cost to maintain an empire. It could cause a lot of problems, and they're going to start, we're going to see that empire start to shrink, okay? And they also believe that decolonization was inevitable. So we're going to start to see different areas become independent, like Burma, Sri Lanka. Great Britain, like I said, with the creation of Israel, is going to withdraw from Palestine, okay? You're going to see, in Africa, Ghana and Nigeria become independent, all right? And Great Britain is going to, slowly start to see that great grand British Empire start to disappear. Okay? Now, with the withdrawal of European countries, Great Britain, France, okay, we're going to see, it's going to have differing effects in different areas. In Africa, mainly because of how Africa was drawn up from the Berlin Conference in the 1800s and divided up. We're going to see a lot of instability, and that's because of tribal warfare that goes back hundreds of years. But Asia will be better off, okay? And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But Africa is going to really suffer as Europe and Great Britain and France start to recede. But Asia will be pretty stable, okay? Now, another big area of decolonization is going to be France with Algeria, okay? Now, France, after World War II, kind of had different feelings for decolonization. After World War II, they really felt that they needed to reassert their power, okay? And that was due to their defeat. They were embarrassed by the Nazis, big time. And they are really... they felt that they needed to show that, hey, we're still strong and powerful, and So they're going to have kind of a different, different methodology when it comes to decolonization and different motives, okay? Because they want to reassert their power, they're going to really try to, clamp down in both Algeria and Vietnam. And it's going to lead to some huge confrontations that don't go well for the French. Let's talk about Algeria first. All right. Now, remember, France has been in Algeria since the 1800s, okay? And the voting structure for Algeria favored the French, okay? Then the native Algerians, all right? France is going to extend full voting rights to only a few Algerians after World War I. And after World War II, you're gonna start to see some violence between Muslims and the French, and basically it was because the Muslims were being treated as second-class citizens. All right, and France is going to try to reassert their power in there after World War II because they want to be seen as this powerful country, and a lot of it has to do with pride. Their pride has been hurt because they were taken over by the Nazis in just a couple of weeks. Okay, eventually a civil war is going to break out between the Algerians and the French. And this war is going to really divide French opinion. And we're going to see the same thing kind of break out in Vietnam as well. Okay? Charles de Gaulle, if you remember him, he was the hero of the Free French Resistance in World War II. He is going to agree to become the president of France if the France reforms its government. And de Gaulle will become the president. They're going to issue another constitution, and we're going to see the creation of the Fifth Republic. All right, and if you go back in our history, right, starting with the French Revolution, we know the republics, we know the different empires, but here's the Fifth French Republic. They're still on it today, and Charles de Gaulle is the president. Okay, under de Gaulle, he is going to take France out of Algeria, and we are going to see Algeria have its independence. Many Muslims who support the French are going to flee Algeria for France or be massacred. And you're going to see a massive immigration of a Muslim population into France that is really unwelcome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in regards to terrorism and Europe's relationship with the Muslim population. But the Muslim population is going to become the new scapegoats with immigration. We're going to see it. Remember, the traditional scapegoats in Europe were the Jewish population, Jews, but with decolonization, with some of the radical Islamic groups that we've seen with terrorism going on, Muslims are going to be kind of scapegoated and viewed in a negative light. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the Muslim population who immigrated to France from Algeria is going to be viewed in a very negative light. And here is Charles de Gaulle, the new president of France. Now, very similarly, ladies and gentlemen, France is going to be having problems in Vietnam, okay? And we're going to see this kind of going on at the same time as their problems in Africa with Algeria. Now, France, if we remember this, with new imperialism, gained control of Indochina, which is Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Now, World War II is going to allow the Vietnam nationalistic movement to gain influence and traction. In World War II, the United States and the Allies actually are going to support Ho Chi Minh, who was the leader of the Vietnam movement, because he was helping them fight against the Japanese. Okay, they needed Ho Chi Minh. They needed the Vietnamese to help fight against the Japanese, and he was really, he was the leader who was doing this. He was communist. He was anti-colonial. And he was a nationalist. And he's going to declare Vietnam's independence from France in 1945. Now, Ho Chi Minh was a communist, but something that I learned about Ho Chi Minh when I went to Vietnam, and Vietnam is a beautiful country, and Ho Chi Minh's a really interesting character, is that he achieved his position without the Chinese or the Soviets. He did this all on his own, and he truly understood the people. Okay, and he had a lot of support from the people. Okay, so he was in a very unique position, and that's a position that both France and later the United States is really going to underestimate, was how much support he truly had from the people. They thought he was just this puppet of the Chinese and the Soviets. That was not true. Okay, Cambodia and Laos will remain under kind of pro-French or neutral monarchies, but Vietnam is going to be the real epicenter of problems for France in Asia. Okay, so we're going to see civil war break out. The French are going to be annihilated in a battle with the Vietnamese. We're going to see Vietnam be split into two. In the north, kind of like Korea, Ho Chi Minh will and the communists will rule, and the south, France will control it. We're going to see the United States get involved in this because they were a little worried about communism spreading, and we're going to see containment again. With China becoming communist, okay, this is going to influence the United States to kind of step up their involvement, okay? And we're going to see the United States start to take a larger role in Southeast Asia and create SEATO, which is their own version of NATO in Southeast Asia. They want to contain communism, okay? And we're going to see, Thailand, Pakistan, the Philippines, Australia get involved, okay? And this is containment. The United States is going to assume, though, and the United States makes a fundamental error in this, is they thought that North Vietnam was a puppet of the Soviets or Chinese. They thought that Ho Chi Minh was kind of propped up by these two governments, and that wasn't true. Remember, he had the support of the people. And Ho Chi Minh had been fighting for independence for a long, long, long time, and ever since World War II with the Japanese. And but the United States really underestimated the situation and really didn't understand what was going on, okay? France is going to withdraw from South Vietnam in 1955, and the United States is going to kind of support the South Vietnamese government. Okay, the United States is going to support a leader named Diem. All right, and we are going to see Ho Chi Minh and his military group, the Viet Cong, make it a goal to overthrow Diem. Okay. The United States is going to assassinate him to put in what they view as a more effective leader. And I think this, I struggle pronouncing this name, but I think it was Nguyen Van Thieu to be in charge. But we're going to see this situation in Vietnam really spiral out of control for the United States. Kennedy is going to be assassinated. The civil rights movement is going on in the United States at the same time. Lyndon Baines Johnson is going to become otherwise known as LBJ, is going to step into power, and he's going to really up the ante and the commitment and escalate the war in Vietnam, especially after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We're going to see in the 60s and 70s major escalation of the war in Vietnam. 500,000 American troops are going to be stationed there. About almost 60,000 Americans are going to be killed. And by the late 1960s, the war is so unpopular. One of the big sayings for Lyndon Baines Johnson was, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? All right. And so this war is going to be so unpopular. And we're going to see Nixon, when he's elected, eventually withdraw from Vietnam. Okay. And end the war. Eventually, in the 70s, we're going to see the South Vietnamese troops evacuate. And North Vietnam is going to take over the entire country, and we will see the southern Vietnamese capital, formerly known as Saigon, renamed Ho Chi Minh City. All right, and Vietnam's results are it's the only war I believe the United States has ever lost since. No, that's not true. I think the United States has lost other wars now. They definitely maybe view the Afghanistan war as a lost war, but the United States lost this war. It really hurt their prestige. Many European nations felt that the United States was focusing more on Asia as opposed to the problems in Europe. And this was a really contentious issue in the United States and very divisive. Okay? And what made the Vietnam War so divisive was the fact that it was on TV. People could watch, get the nightly updates on what was going on. And you had reporters, and with the advent of TV, something you'll learn more about next year in APUSH, the war was more real, okay, and it put it more in the forefront of the American population's eyes. Okay, and here's a map of kind of the progression of the war. Okay, and this was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Okay, we will continue our lecture tomorrow on the end of the Cold War. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.